Okay, and we have right now 37 people in the waiting room. Do you want me to go ahead and start letting them in, or do you want to wait a little bit more?
Maybe wait like 1 or 2 minutes,
Sure.
not a lot.
And why don't we go over the agenda again with everybody, including me, since so we know what we're going to do.
Okay, let me pull it up. I didn't have it up because we do the same thing every time, but let me see.
You need a haircut.
Ah, we all need a haircut.
I was about to say the same thing. So I'm gonna welcome people and call the meeting into order. I'm gonna review the purpose of the meeting. I'm gonna introduce you just briefly, Ray, to say hi, and that you'll be talking later in the meeting about the details of the hearing. And then I'm gonna introduce Charles, and he will share his thoughts about the Poseidon desal project and California coastal protection. And then Charles will talk for as long as you want to, Charles. I would say up to 20 minutes, and then take questions for 10 minutes. And then we'll switch to the what you can do portion of the meeting. Does that seem reasonable?
Yeah.
Yeah. And I put together a little bio, or from the internet about you. Okay, so Ray, I think we should let people in.
All righty, and away we go.
Oh, Ray, we should mute people too. Hi, everyone. Welcome to our meeting. Nice to see some people's faces and some people's names in this brave new world. Mute myself. We're muting everybody because there's lots of background noise as people sign in. But we're glad that you're here, and we're going to get started pretty soon. And really excited about our program tonight. And then we have some other programs that we're going to be doing before the Coastal Commission hearing. So nice to see everyone. Hopefully most people know how to ask questions in the chat. The format will be hearing from our speaker and then asking questions, and then we're going to talk about what we're doing to plan for and mobilize for the upcoming Coastal Commission hearing. So some people to mute there, Ray, if you can mute people.
Yeah, I'm muting away.
Yeah. I guess we will begin. Welcome all of you to our meeting. My name is Elizabeth. My last name is Lamb, and I work with Orange County Coastkeeper and Residents for Responsible Desalination. I'm mostly a community organizer, so it warms my heart to see so many people on this call with us. My biggest skill is I'm very, very pushy, but you'll be glad because I'll keep the meeting moving along. And that'll give people a chance to ask questions, and we won't take up too much of anyone's time. So Ray, do you want to quickly introduce yourself, and then I'll introduce our speaker?
Hello, everyone. My name is Ray Heimstra. I'm the Associate Director of Programs at Orange County Coastkeeper. I've been working on the Poseidon project for about 16 years now, and I wanted to die. So I think that's something that most of us would like to see. And you're going to learn a lot more tonight about the process of reviewing this. And so I'm looking forward to learning myself.
Yeah. So because we want to stab the thing to death, everybody gets a free knife. I'm just kidding. Okay, so let me turn this program over to our esteemed speaker. Let me say a few words about Dr. Charles Lester. He has been working in the field of ocean and coastal management for more than 25 years. He is currently the director of the Ocean and Coastal Policy Center in the Marine Science Institute at UC Santa Barbara, where he researches, writes, and advises about sea level rise, coastal resilience and other aspects of coastal law, policy, and management. Charles worked for many years for the California Coastal Commission, including serving as the agency's 4th executive director from 2011 to 2016. So as you can see, we've got someone very qualified. The upcoming Coastal Commission hearing and about the agenda item, which is the proposed Poseidon desalination plant. So Charles, you're muted, and I'd like to turn the meeting over to you if you're ready.
Great. Thank you. It's great to be here. I didn't realize there were going to be so many people, but I can't even get them all on the screen here. It's nice to have this opportunity to talk to everyone about this project. Maybe I should start just by saying I'm speaking as an individual, not on behalf of UC Santa Barbara in any particular way. So speaking based on my previous experience and work with the Coastal Commission and in the field generally. So I think I'm going to talk for about maybe 20 minutes, and then we can hopefully have more of a conversation about what's happening. I was also just reminded by Elizabeth that we all have different degrees of understanding of this thing called the Coastal Commission, and mine is particularly in depth. So if I say things that don't make sense or are confusing, don't hesitate to ask or interject with questions, because sometimes I assume things that aren't common knowledge about how the Coastal Commission works or doesn't work sometimes. And so, I'm just going to go with the flow a little bit and hopefully provide some interesting thoughts and comments on this project. Some of you may know that the staff recommendation for the Coastal Commission just came out a couple hours ago. So I'm going to mostly give an overview of that, some of the highlights that I see in that recommendation, and then we can build on that for a conversation. Before I get into that, just Coastal Commission 101, it's a state agency responsible for land use planning and regulation in the coastal zone. So that varies up and down the coast, but basically it's a state agency with a lot of authority over what can happen or not along our coastlines. The basic structure of that agency is there's a politically appointed commission with 12 commissioners who can vote on things up or down or approve with conditions, yes or no. And there's a staff, the professional staff, that makes recommendations to the Coastal Commission about what they think ought to happen in any particular case, applying the state policy, which is under the California Coastal Act, to the particular issues that they're looking at. So in this case, we're talking about a proposed desalination plant in Huntington Beach. And the question is whether that project should be allowed to happen or not. And the Coastal Commission is reviewing it for consistency with the state policies that are in the Coastal Act. And the staff has made a recommendation about what to do in this case. And some of you may know, if you've seen the report, they're recommending that the project be denied. So that in itself is a significant way to start the hearing in a couple of weeks, because the staff, the professionals who are looking at the law and the facts that are presented by this case are saying, you know what, this project just doesn't stand up to the state requirements of a variety of those requirements. And I'm going to just briefly march through those, the ones that are highlighted in the staff recommendation. But that kind of sets up a controversy for the Coastal Commission and the public to weigh in on what they think ought to happen here. And because the staff is recommending denial, it really presents us, kind of a not black and white necessarily, but a starker question than if they were recommending approval with various kinds of conditions to address different issues. So let me share my screen here real quick. See if I can do that. You see that okay? Yeah?
We do.
Okay. So I'm just going to talk quickly about 4 or 5 issues that are highlighted in the staff recommendation. And the first issue that you may have heard about is what might be broadly called coastal hazards issues. And the Coastal Act, the state law, requires, in a nutshell, that new development be done in a way that's going to be safe, essentially, and not cause coastal hazards or be subject to coastal hazards in the future. And those coastal hazards are things like erosion, flooding, landslides, any kinds of hazardous events that might happen on the coast. And the Coastal Act says, avoid those when you're doing something new. Well, in this case, the Coastal Commission staff have identified a number of coastal hazards that they think are fatal flaws to this project. And the biggest one, and one you've probably seen some press about, is the question of flooding and sea level rise related to the effects of climate change. So if you aren't aware, people have been now looking at the question of sea level rise for a number of years, and we can anticipate some pretty significant changes in the level of the ocean in coming decades. And so the Coastal Commission staff has asked, well, what does that mean for this project? As you know, this shows you where that project site is located. It's very near the ocean, near the beach, at the power plant site that's already there and would be redeveloped on that location. But this map is showing you, for example, the fact that it's already in a flood zone, what's considered to be a flood zone for extreme flooding events. And so that sets the stage for an analysis by the Coastal Commission staff of future risks to that proposed desalination plant. This slide, these are all slides, by the way, from the staff recommendation. So you can find these online now, and you could use them in your own presentations if you were to go to the Coastal Commission, for example. But this is one of the exhibits the Coastal staff have put forward, just showing you how in the past, all of this green area underlying the project site used to be wetlands, right? So we know from history that this was a low-lying area that was regularly inundated with water. And so it's not unreasonable to think that with sea level rise, it might be inundated again in the future. This is the site currently, and you can see how that relates to this former footprint of where the wetlands were. So it's a low-lying site in danger from potential ocean forces, high tide events now, flooding events now, and certainly more in the future with sea level rise. So this slide actually is a slide that's not shown in the staff report. I just put it together quickly this afternoon, but there's this great resource that we have in California called the Cosmos Storm Modeling System, and also known as our CoStar Future site. And all of you can go to this website if you want and play around with different scenarios of flooding and shoreline erosion and as a function of sea levels that are projected to see what that might mean. This slide right here is simply showing you the proposed site under current conditions with no particular storm conditions assumed and current sea levels. And this site on the right is showing you the projected flooding, maximum and minimum flooding levels if we get 2 meters of sea level rise. And so what does that mean? Well, 2 meters of sea level rise is a little over 6 feet of sea level rise. That's a lot of elevation in the potential level of the ocean. But the analysis is that if that happens, the site where they're proposing the desalination plant is basically potentially becoming an island during storm conditions, and that this new change in the level of the water and what it does to the site is a problem for the project because it might actually cause it to not be able to function at critical times. The water supply that is to be provided in theory by this project may not be functional under these conditions. And there's concerns about underground infrastructure like pipelines and the access roads and all of the things that you might expect to happen around a critical water supply facility that will be potentially underwater or significantly impacted by future sea level rise. So one of the arguments that the coastal staff make in their recommendation is that this is a fatal flaw that has not been addressed, even though Poseidon has proposed to elevate the primary location of the facilities. That's not going to prevent this island effect over the longer run. So there's a lot of detail in there, and if you want to wade into that issue, you can, and see all the different ways that sea level rise is projected. Just to keep it moving here, and we can come back to all of these. Another related issue, it's not related to sea level rise, but simply the potential for a tsunami to happen at this location. And that, of course, is an extreme event which might be caused by an offshore earthquake or some kind of underwater landslide that would create a large wave into Huntington Beach. And this exhibit here is showing you the potential inundation zone of a tsunami that could potentially happen in the area of the project. And so you can see that, and this is based on 11 feet of wave run up, meaning the 11-foot high wave. There could be inundation over the entire site, and in fact, significantly inland of the site, about almost 2 miles inland, based on a tsunami. So that also means we're basically asking, should we put a new important water facility in this area that's considered to be in danger from a potential tsunami? And it's hard to generalize, but often governments and the public sector will say, well, we shouldn't, at the very least, we shouldn't put critical facilities or community facilities like schools and hospitals, police and fire facilities in these tsunami zones, because that's not good planning, and you don't want to have your critical services in danger from something like that. Similarly, there's also an analysis in the staff report about earthquakes and potential hazards at the site due to shaking along this identified fault that happens to looks like it goes right through the site. I think that's a newer revelation in the scheme of things, and that because of that potential earthquake fault and activity on it, you could have some liquefaction and hazardous issue concerns related to the physical construction of the facility there. So that was issue number one. Because of coastal hazards, the project in the staff's view does not meet the state requirement to minimize and avoid coastal hazards to new development. All right, the second issue is marine resources. Now, you may have also heard about this, and it's been a longstanding concern that the project is actually going to rely on an existing intake and outfall from the power plant. So it will be taking in a lot of water, ocean water, and in the process of taking that ocean water in, it's going to actually result in killing a lot of marine life. That's just what happens when that happens with the power plants now, and it would happen with this project if they continued to draw water in like that. So the estimates from the analysis is basically that it's the equivalent of losing about 423 acres of ocean and estuarine habitat if we did that each year. So a really significant impact. And this slide, or this diagram, which is in the staff report, shows you the volume, the theoretical volume of how much water would be taken in by this plant every year. You can see it basically runs about 10 miles along the coast and a mile out. And that's a lot of water. There's a lot of marine life in that. Very small organisms mostly we're talking about, but a lot of marine life. And so the staff concludes in this quote here on the right that overall, the proposed project would result in substantial loss of marine life, and that the proposed mitigation is far less than needed to address these impacts. And so often it's pretty common for the Coastal Commission to approve projects that will have impacts, but they can only do that if they can also at the same time agree with a condition or a mitigation program that will offset those impacts. In this case, the staff is saying those impacts are so large and the mitigation that Poseidon is proposing is so inadequate that we can't approve this right now. There's no way to find that the mitigation that Poseidon thinks it has is actually adequate to offset this impact. That's the bottom line of this finding. But this is a little more detail about that. You can see that based on the analysis, and it's pretty technical, if you want to go in and get some of the detail, there's a lot there. But basically, people talk about the marine life impacts in terms of credits, and then the mitigation is supposed to offset that in an equivalent number of credits. Here they say that the impacts would be roughly equivalent to about 2 to 4 square miles of unmitigated marine productivity. So again, a large amount of marine life lost. And even if you give Poseidon credit for all of the projects that they think they can do to offset this impact, there would still be a deficit over the life of the project. And so they calculate this impact over the entire life of the facility, which is 50 years in this case. And they say that even if everything works as planned, there's going to be a deficit of about 500 credits over the 50-year life. So that's a huge impact that is not mitigated. And that's the bottom line what the staff is saying. So next issue that I want to highlight is environmental justice. And this is a more recent finding that the Coastal Commission has been making under an amendment to the Coastal Act a few years back. And essentially the law now says we need to take special care to see whether there are unequal impacts or impacts of development and projects on disadvantaged communities or communities that have certain kinds of inequities inherent in them. So these are both staff report figures again that show you on the left-hand side the areas that are considered to be, quote, disadvantaged communities in red here under a state definition of what that means. And generally speaking, that's about level of income and how much the average income is in a particular area relative to the statewide average. So this is the service area for the water district and showing you the potential disadvantaged communities that might be served by such a project as this. And so that's one dimension. And then over here on the right-hand side, you see again mapped low-income communities and disadvantaged communities nearby the project site. And then the argument is made, or the evidence is presented, that basically in this case, because there's a lack of information from Poseidon about who's actually going to use this water, where it's going to go to, and you may be familiar with that issue, that they still haven't made a strong case that anybody wants this water. So we don't know what the impact might be of, for example, the much higher cost of this water that is anticipated. So the argument the staff is making is that because we can't figure that out, there may be some significant environmental justice impacts if we do this project, because the cost of the water is going to be 3 to 4 times higher than other supplies that are available. So that's the essence of that justice argument. The last major issue I wanted to talk about was something called the public welfare. And this is, there's a policy in the Coastal Act, which basically says some kinds of development are coastal dependent and they have to be on the coast in order to function. So for example, a boating facility has to be located on the shoreline in order to work, right? Otherwise you couldn't put your boats in the water. In this case, there's a possible argument that the facility is dependent on the coastline because it needs the seawater to function. the Coastal Commission says, well, actually, technically, it's not the case because you could move the facility even further inland, and right now it's inland of the shoreline, simply by extending the pipelines, the intake and the outfall of the project. And so it doesn't really have to be on the coast, but they then go on to say, well, even if it is coastal dependent, there's this policy that can allow the Coastal Commission to approve something, even if they find it otherwise inconsistent with the state law. And that's this public welfare override finding, is what they call it. However, in this case, the Coastal Commission staff is saying, even if we assume that this policy applies in this case, the standard isn't met for a number of reasons. And these are summaries of some of those arguments. One argument is that there are other projects that we can see or figure out and know about that could potentially provide more water than the Poseidon project at a lower cost and with greater reliability. So one of the public welfare requirements in this policy is that you have to make a finding that it's necessary for the public welfare to do something. The Coastal Commission staff is saying, well, actually, we don't think it is because there's these other projects we could do that would be cheaper and more reliable. So this one obviously isn't in the public welfare or the public interest. Second point that is made based on this UCLA study from 2019 is that the main effect of this project would be to raise rates for area customers. In other words, it doesn't really address a water supply issue or a reliability issue. What it does is provide a source of water that is going to be a lot more expensive than the water you've already got. That study concludes that it would be more effective to take an approach where you obtain water from conservation and other alternatives in order to meet the need of the area. And then this last point is based on a very recent study. It actually came out in, is it still April? Yeah, this month, from the Pacific Institute, which identified that for this particular region, the South Coast region, which includes Orange County, you could use efficiency, reuse of existing water, and conservation measures to reduce your water demand by up to 48%. In other words, you could eliminate the need for a project like this simply through efficiency and conservation, right? Which is another argument for why this project is not in the public's welfare interest. And then there's finally this observation from the water district and the urban water management plan, and that concludes that this project really isn't needed in order to address the arguments you may be hearing about, like the drought, the extended drought, climate change, more uncertainty in water supply. But this study says that the region could meet its water demand for the next 25 years, including planning for extreme drought conditions, without this project. So that raises, a fundamental uncertainty about whether this project is even needed from the coastal staff standpoint, and therefore they can't make any kind of finding that this is in the public interest and that the other issue should be overridden. So, that's a really brief nutshell of the main issues that the coastal staff is raising for this project, and we can circle back to them. I had one other point that I wanted to make for now, which I've been thinking about a lot, especially since I left the Coastal Commission. And it's not discussed in the staff recommendation, and I don't know whether anybody's really talked about it much, but this is just a simple idea that the ocean waters, the shoreline, they're considered to be public trust resources. In other words, they are resources held in trust by the state for the public, for us. And I've been studying, talking about this issue a lot recently in terms of beaches and shoreline protection and what happens with sea level rises as the beaches get more narrow, and how do we protect the public's interest in the beach. Well, here, I haven't researched it in detail, but I just think there's a fundamental question being raised about the use of ocean water in this way. And is it okay for us to contemplate a private project like this, basically appropriating a public resource, ocean water, and then processing it and selling it back to us in this way? So it's not necessarily a Coastal Act concern, but it's a concern I have as a citizen about how we should use our public trust resources. And maybe we need to take a step back and have a more considered assessment and thinking about how we should be using these public trust ocean resources for the benefit of the society as a whole. So I'm going to stop there, Elizabeth. So I know you only wanted me to talk for 20 minutes.
So that was perfect at 7:31. So I miss in-person meetings, but one thing about these online meetings is they can be really efficient. So people have some questions and I'll read them to you, and perhaps you can answer them. And because I have a little bit of knowledge, that might help. Somebody's asking about the marine impacts of the salinity from the return flow. And let me explain that in words that I understand, which is that the proposed Poseidon desalination plant would suck in all this ocean water, and then and kill all the marine life. And then there is this process to extract out the, let's just call it potable water. It's not really all that good of water. And then they put the residue back in the ocean. So if you live in Huntington Beach, there's going to be this new added residue dumped back in the ocean. And so someone was asking about that and how that ties into the impacts of the Poseidon proposal.
I can tell you generally, I might have to go into the staff report to see what they say most recently, but basically about half of the water they suck in is lost when through the processing. So half of it goes back out, right? And the other half gets turned into potable desalted water. So it's that other 50% that's going back out. And it does have a higher salinity because of they're concentrating the salts into the output. And that can have an impact when it comes out the outfall underwater, because it can settle in an area basically and cause these differentials in water quality in that immediate area of the outfall, which can kill marine life. So I can't tell you what the quantification of that is right now. I could in a minute if I get a chance to look, but they have technologies called diffusers at the end of the outfall, which are intended to basically disperse the high salinity water in order to mitigate that potential impact. And in theory, they're doing that here in the design. So I'll have to check and see if that's a basis for a denial at this point or not, but it is an impact of concern.
So there's another question that the gist of it is, what's the big deal about all these larvae that get filtered and killed, since that's what happens when a wave crashes on the beach? So could you talk about that? As
a non-biologist, I can try. I think a lot of these, there are different kinds of impacts, and I'm sure that there's physical impacts and mortality to certain organisms due to wave energy, but I would imagine it's not nearly the same as the numbers of organisms that are being drawn in to a facility like this and basically, killed through the process. And so the magnitude of the impact, I'm sure, is not nearly the same. You're also bringing in organisms that are, out there floating in the nearshore waters, and there's very technical analyses of what kinds of organisms might be affected and how to offset it. And that's where it gets pretty technical, which is translating these small organisms and loss of productivity, what's called marine productivity, into some kind of mitigation proposal, like creating a wetland somewhere else, which would, in theory, create an equivalent amount of productivity. The other thing to keep in mind is that the whole the whole enterprise we're doing here is to evaluate a new development proposal under the state law. And the state law basically says, okay, we have this condition, this baseline condition, and then human interventions. We want to build things and do economic activities. Some of those activities have impacts, and the state law says if you're going to do something, you have to make sure you avoid those impacts or offset them with mitigation. So the waves crashing on the beach don't need to get a permit, right? Unless, of course, that's being created by some other human intervention or development that under the law has to account for itself.
I don't know if you can address this. I know it's a very important issue to the folks who live in Huntington Beach, and I can completely understand that. But there's real concerns that if Poseidon is approved and they start to dig up the streets near the proposed plant and through southeast Huntington Beach, there's a lot of icky, toxic stuff in the earth, and there are folks concerned about human health. And I don't know if you want to say anything about that.
There is a discussion in the staff report about, as part of the environmental justice findings about particularly the adjacent industrial sites where I'm sure there's legacy pollution, concerns about future flooding in relationship to this site, whether the construction of this site will somehow exacerbate or enhance that potential risk to these toxics that are probably out there. And so it is a concern, and it's a pretty unfortunately not uncommon occurrence to have our industrial facilities located in the neighborhoods that are around these facilities are bearing an unfair burden relative to many other places for these industrial activities. So I don't know the details on the street development or redevelopment in this case. One of the issues has been the more concern that those access roads to the facility will be underwater at some point or in extreme events, and that would affect the functioning of the plant.
And you touched briefly on environmental justice, and I just want to really emphasize something. When I think about what makes me concerned about the proposed Poseidon desal, the idea that water, which is a human right that we all need to survive, would be produced by a for-profit company, that seems dangerous to me, a dangerous precedent to set. And obviously, people who have less resources will be impacted the most. So that just sends a chill up my spine to have private companies in the distribution of something we need to live.
And that, absent the observation about the private sector nature, that's basically what the coastal recommendation is saying, is that this project is anticipated to be a lot more expensive in terms of the water it would provide than other sources. And that's going to have a unequal impact on those people who have less ability to pay. And that's one of the justice impacts, environmental justice impacts. And personally, I agree that we're talking about a public resource, and I'm not saying we wouldn't need desal, and we do have desal in other places up and down the coast. But California, when they've done it, has tried to do it in a way that avoids these impacts. So for example, using the subsurface intake instead of an open ocean intake. And that's something that was a longstanding issue in this case too, which the regional board finally decided was okay in this situation. You can go into that more if you want, but desal may be part of our water future, but if we're talking about desalting ocean water, shouldn't that be put in the most public of contexts to the maximum public benefit? And here, I'm not sure we even know what who's going to be winning and losing and by how much at the end of the day, right? So how can we say that this is something we want to proceed with right now without having a full understanding of who's paying how much for this water that is a public trust resource?
So I want to let people know that, and I say this without exaggeration, This is one of the most important environmental battles in California because of the precedent it would set. And every major environmental organization has gotten involved in the fight. The first desal plant similar to this one by some of the same people was constructed in Carlsbad. And one of the questions is, how's that one working and how much damage has that one done to the ocean?
There's a number of points in this staff recommendation that just came out that talk about the Carlsbad plant as an analog for what we might anticipate here. And so one of the discussions that's in the report, in fact, is that they went through the same debates about impacts and mitigation at that time. Projects were proposed to offset the impacts of the Carlsbad plant. And looking back, we now see that, well, those projects didn't even begin until well after the plant started to produce water. So basically we were impacting the marine environment without offsetting it. And then when you look at what has actually been accomplished so far, there's been a huge deficit in the offsetting of the impacts. So the arguments that were made at the time by the developer, Poseidon, for that project kind of missed the mark, right? So that's another reason the coastal staff says we should be really skeptical right now of all of the uncertainty underlying these arguments that are being made about how they can offset their impacts. Is that, well, let's look at what happened in Carlsbad. Oh, they didn't do it. Maybe we should be a little more skeptical.
So there's other questions, but we're getting up against 7:45, and somebody asked a question which really is a great way to sort of move the meeting into what you can do if you're concerned about Poseidon. Somebody wrote, since the commission's own staff is recommending not approving the project, do concerned citizens need to play a role? Is there still a chance it could be approved? And Ray, I don't know if you want to turn on your camera and talk a little bit about this, but this is not a project that's been based really on the facts or science or anything like that. It's been a real political process, small p political. And so it still keeps limping along, even though, as I said before, there is a broad coalition of environmental groups, including some that support desal when it's needed, fighting this. And it's gone through many hearings and meetings, but the upcoming Coastal Commission meeting is possibly the most important. Do you want to add to that, Ray?
Sure. I just want to start off by thanking all of you for coming. We now have 90 people online. So that just shows how important this is and how much interest there is in the community about this. I also want to thank everybody for the robust and polite chat that's going on. A lot of good questions. We read a bunch of them, and there's more in that chat. So if you're not looking at that, take a look. But what Elizabeth was saying is absolutely true. It is absolutely critical that your voice is heard in this. And the best way for your voice to be heard is for you to be at that meeting on May 12th at the Hilton in Costa Mesa, in person. It's a big ask, but it's going to be critical, because when commissioners are making a tough decision, like not building Poseidon, and that even though it makes total sense from the financial side, the lack of need for the water, etc., politics have played a huge portion in this, and there's going to be a lot of political pressure to push this through, regardless of the consequences of finances. You're standing there and talking to the commission, or holding a sign, or them seeing you opposing Poseidon is going to help give them that backbone that they're going to need. And they're going to need it because Poseidon's certainly going to bring in their supporters. And their supporters have a different set of things. They're talking about jobs. A lot of them are scared we're going to run out of water, which is a farce. But there is going to be a very large contingent of Poseidon supporters there. And we not only need to balance that out, we need to drown it out. So we need every one of you there. Bring your kid, bring your dog, and you can say anything you want. Speaking is easy. It can be as simple as, this is dumb, vote against it. Or you can make whatever comment you are, and you want, my elevator speech is that it's going to pollute our water, kill our marine life, cost a fortune, and most importantly, we don't need it. So we can talk about any one of those or anything else, because there's just so many impacts. So I just can't overstate how important it is for you to be there and participate.
And this is the thing that sticks in my mind. I'll bet there's people that remember when Gavin Newsom got in a lot of trouble for having that dinner at that fancy restaurant up in Napa. Remember that? One of the hosts of that special fancy dinner was from the company that a lobbyist from the company that wants to build this proposed desalination plant. So the governor's, people who lobby the governor really have his ears. So we need to push back with what we have. And the cool thing about this effort is that we have all these experts. There's people like Charles Lester. We have really good lawyers from the Natural Resources Defense Council. We have really good experts. So we have a lot of people working on this who will be doing their part. But I say this because I mean it. There's no one like a community member who can talk about the impacts to them and their lives and the place that they live. And I will never forget spending time in Southeast Huntington Beach and seeing these great homes that people really care about in this great community. And to have a resource like the beach be messed up for a for-profit company or your community is just wrong. And I'm going to acknowledge, and Ray's going to acknowledge, that it's really tough to get to a hearing during the week, during the day. But the people that support Poseidon, and they are out there, they will be there. So we just need to do our part by holding a sign. Somebody asked if they could bring a sign, or just saying a few words about the thing that worries you the most about Poseidon. And we'll be there to help you. We can help you fill out a slip to talk. We're going to try to cover people's parking costs, stuff like that, because we know we're asking a lot, asking you to attend the meeting. But if we don't attend, there'll only be people there that supports Poseidon. And I'm just going to be really honest with you. There are groups that the thing they want to do is build it. They want to build Poseidon. So they aren't really thinking about the environmental impacts or the impacts to your neighborhood. They're thinking about their jobs, which I'm sympathetic to that, but not this plant in this place that causes this kind of damage. And so we're hosting these community meetings, even over Zoom, so that we can educate you about the project and then ask you to get involved. So that's our ask. And I am just sort of curious if people could tell me how many people think they might be able to take some time to go to the hearing on May 12th. Some people might be able to. Well, the more, the better. And it'll be a really interesting experience because, oh, look, people are using the little reactions, which I'm not even very good at. So thanks for that, you guys. So that's what we're doing, is we're just educating you and inviting you to do your part. And for people that are big nerds and have been following this for a while, the Regional Water Quality Control Board, they were the people that could have put like a stake through the heart of Poseidon. But what the Coastal Commission can do is say you can't build it for these specific reasons that have to do with our mission. So we need to be there to support the staff and support the commissioners that are going to look at the facts about this. So I really,
Elizabeth, I want to point out there was a good question, and it said, if the Coastal Commission doesn't approve this, does this kill the project, or can they just go another route? Poseidon can keep this alive as long as they want. I mean, they've already kept it alive for 20 years. They lost, they didn't get past the Coastal Commission last time. But if the commission denies their permit, they will need to start over again with the commission at least. And that's a big process. So yes, basically, in the real world, if the commission denies this, this probably deals a death blow to this project.
And it's really amazing that the staff recommended denial. That was kind of a surprising, cool win on our part. And it really demonstrates what we've known all along. It's a really awful project with a lot of awful impacts. You just have to find unbiased people to say that and communicate it. So in addition to this meeting, we're going to have 2 more organizing meetings that I want to tell you about because they're really going to be amazing. Next Monday, we're going to have Bill Powers, who's a climate change and gas quantification expert. I mean, a really brilliant man who's going to talk about the climate change impacts of Poseidon. And what makes him really remarkable is that he's very smart on the issue, and he's really good about explaining it like so a regular person can understand. So we'll be sending out emails and invites about it, but if you can possibly join us next Monday, that's going to be what he's going to talk about. And then we're going to have a really amazing woman wrap up the following Monday. And her name is Susan Jordan, and she's a lobbyist. She lobbies the Coastal Commission for environmental groups and public interest groups. So she knows the Coastal Commission backwards and forwards, and she can give people tips about how to be the most effective and be heard by the commissioners. So, I mean, that's basically the purpose of this meeting, was to educate you and then, ask you to participate. And Ray and I will do everything we can to make it as easy and as fun as experience as it can be, because it is going to be during the day, during the week. But believe me when I tell you, there'll be plenty of people there from the other side, so we need you.
Elizabeth, maybe I could just add that I think you both have summarized it well in terms of the potential impact people can have, and the reality that it is a political process. And so, we want political representation in our government, and that's one reason why we have commissioners that are appointed by the legislature and the governor to make these important decisions. But it can be very political with a small p. And you mentioned Susan being a lobbyist. Well, you can bet there are lobbyists on the other side. And if you want to see a good example of that, go to the staff report that's posted now on the commission's website. And one of the things that's posted there next to the report is something called ex parte communications. And not every commissioner takes those. These are communications that may happen between an applicant, for example, and a commissioner before the hearing. And the law says, well, you can do those, but if you have one of those, you have to put it into the public record so all of us can see what's being talked about, right? That's good transparency in government. Well, at least one commissioner, Commissioner Mark Gold, who's not a voting commissioner, but I noticed that he's got a number of ex partes that he's put into the record. And if you want to go see what Poseidon and some of the reps are saying, you can go there and see it, and see what he declared as having happened in these conversations. So I don't know how many commissioners are having these in this case. A lot of them have particularly in the last decade, have decided not to take them at all as a principle, but others also do entertain them. So it's really important, if you care about this, to make your voice heard and to be at the hearing if you can, ideally. I would also just point out it is a hybrid hearing. So those of you who can't maybe make the physical trip, you could log in and weigh in, I think, on Zoom.
But it won't be the same.
No, it won't be the same. I don't want to defeat your goal of getting people there, which is really important. But the point is to show the commission that there's a lot of people who care about this. And ideally, you would find that issue or two that really is important to you and highlight it.
And we have experts that meet with the coastal commissioners as well, that have put together briefing books and put together fact sheets for the commissioners. We're doing all that. But the folks on the Zoom call are the people that can talk about the impacts to their community and their environment. That's why we're hosting these meetings.
I just want
somebody
to
wants contact.
I just want to say real quick that I've attended a bunch of these agency meetings, and Charles has been to thousands. There's nothing like a personal story, and it's often that somebody from the, isn't a regular or something, and this gets up and speaks from the heart and says, this is what it means to me, and this is what's going to happen to my neighborhood, and this is what I think. So don't think that your message, whatever that is, it wouldn't sway them or isn't important.
So there's some questions here, some of which we have the answers to and some of which we don't, which we'll email you. We'll email you how to contact the Coastal Commission and express your views through email. Somebody asked what the COVID protocol is for this meeting, and the Coastal Commission meeting, we don't know that yet. But we'll follow up with everybody with these good questions. Did you have anything else, Ray?
I just want to add that, since you signed up for this meeting, you are on our mailing list. And yes, you will get all kinds of information, and we will make sure, as Elizabeth said, that we make it as clear and easy and fun as possible to attend a state agency meeting on an important policy issue like Poseidon.
That will shape the coast of Huntington Beach and the water, the ocean for decades. So, well, I think with that, we'll get out all the information that people have been asking for. And I want to thank you for your time. Thumbs up for going to the hearing, or a reaction, or wave at me or something is the worst thing about Zoom, right? Oh, good, people are waving at me. And we will keep pressing forward. And I really want to make a pitch for attending our meeting next Monday. We'll be sending out that information probably tomorrow. So I appreciate everybody's time, and I hope to see you at the Coastal Commission hearing, and before then online. So thanks, everybody.
Bye-bye.
We ended with 3 minutes to spare. Thanks.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.